Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you chose to spend some time here. I am honored that you're listening in. Today on the show, I am talking with Jenni Lien. Jenni is a second-generation immigrant. She was born in the UK, moved to Canada when she was 8, and now lives in Hong Kong. So our conversation is literally happening across the world. In our conversation, Jenni talks about growing up experiencing lots of diversity and how that led her to appreciate how different God has made us. She shares what led her to Hong Kong and describes the culture, the current unrest, and her experience with the coronavirus. Jenni talks about not giving into fear, but trying to be a light during fearful times. Jenni and I recorded this on March 10th, and so much has changed since then. On March 10th, there were only a handful of COVID-19 cases in the US, and it didn't feel close to home for me at all yet. Jenni tells me in our conversation about the toilet paper shortage in Hong Kong, and I just don't understand why that would be a thing. It's almost comical how quickly this has become a reality for me too. Jenni is also the writer and the artist behind the Yay Project, which seeks to help women celebrate their God-given design by reminding them that you are you. Yay! We dig into how and why Jenni started the Yay Project. She talks about feeling like her life was going exactly according to God's plan and how when things fell apart, all she had was God's faithfulness to get her through. Jenni talks about carrying a fear of rejection and needing to heal from some old wounds in order to more fully accept her God-given design and how she wants to encourage other women to do the same. Jenni is so cute and sweet, and I was honored to get to chat with her, and I am so happy to share it with you now. Everything we talk about can be found in the show notes for today's episode on girlstalkinglife.com. Here is my conversation with Jenni. Hey there, Jenni. Thanks so much for being a guest on Girls Talking Life.
Hey, Johanna. So nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to talk with you. You are Canadian, which I've interviewed a few Canadian women, but you are the first Canadian living in Hong Kong that I've gotten to talk to. So I'm thrilled.
That's so cool. There are so many, I think just the fact that we've even been able to meet, like if it weren't for social media and Instagram, this just wouldn't have been possible. So I think it's so cool that we've been able to do this.
I agree, it is. And just introduce yourself and tell me how you spend your days, Jenni.
So I am a second generation immigrant. So I was actually born in the UK, lived there until I was 8, and then moved to Canada and then stayed there up until after university. And I'm also a second generation Christian. So my parents were believers. I think my mom was in high school, then my dad was in university. So I always grew up in the church. So if I can maybe just talk about that and how that's brought me here, I think just I've always grown up in very diverse churches. And so whether it was in the UK, there were always lots of different nationalities around. And then growing up in Canada, I think, there must have been at least, 20 different nationalities, even in just my high school.
Wow.
And getting to like that love of seeing so many different ways that God has created people, I guess, which is why I always had this big desire to see more of the world. And so in Canada, I live in this place called Waterloo, which is about 100,000 people, quite small. And so I was super prayerful, in college, God, please, I'll go anywhere. I'll serve you anywhere. And then, I'll work on my hands and knees doing whatever you want. And then he sent me to Singapore. And I worked for university there and then started a career in publishing. And then after 4 years, he moved me to Hong Kong, where I am now. And during the day, I work in children's book publishing and then recently started the Yay Project about half a year ago.
When I first contacted you, I said, hey, Jenni, I want to talk about you being a Christian in China. Is there a concern for your safety? And you said, actually, no. Hong Kong is much different. Can you talk to me just a little bit about that for anyone else who is not as clued in about those things like me?
Oh, for sure. I think Hong Kong is going through some changes at the moment. And so I think one of the things that a lot of Hong Kongers are very passionate about is their freedom to choose, especially with things concerning faith. And so Hong Kong is very free. There's no restriction in that sense. So there's lots of churches, big, thriving and very interactive church community.
You mentioned that they're going through a lot of changes. There have been some anti-government protests even happening over the last several months to a year, maybe. What has that been like?
I think honestly, it has been quite scary in some senses, like not to play that down. I think I can't even pretend to understand the full scope of it, but maybe I can just share a bit about like what it's like as an expat living in the city during this time.
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously a very complicated situation. So you can see where both sides are coming from, both the protesters, but also the government, pro-government side. But just as a person living here, like a Christian living in Hong Kong at this moment, it's very, sad and sometimes scary because Hong Kong, when I first moved here 4 years ago, Hong Kong was, I think, thriving. There were, things like lots of restaurants opening, MTR lines. It was a lot of fun. It was very, very safe. There was no issue being out sort of any time of the day. There wasn't a lot of crime. To now sometimes in the past couple of months with the protests, leaving my apartment and just seeing, vandalism everywhere. The MTR station, which is kind of like our version of the subway line, the glass is all smashed. And then not to go into any of the other things you might see on the news, but, I have been sometimes 10 feet from where a lot of demonstrations were happening, and just being and hearing the chants of the unrest, it's quite intense. But I also think that, when it comes to God, I think when fearful situations happen, especially if we know, for example, that we have a passport, we could leave. If God's called us here and we don't feel like he's called us to go, then he has us here for a reason, and to not give into fear and not give into, anything that might come with that hoarding and being aggressive, but trying to see what God wants us to do and what we can do to sort of be a light during this time.
Another kind of crazy world event is the coronavirus. And
Indeed.
It emerged in China, right near you, and Hong Kong is not on the high alert right now, but you are on a watch. How has that affected your daily life?
I think I've been really blessed to be part of a church where it's brought up sort of regularly so we can all talk about it together. So there's no, keeping the fear inside. We can talk things through, because sometimes it's hard to understand how to react, because obviously it's scary. And when it first came out, we weren't really sure how severe it was, like, could it be airborne? Is it actually, so whether or not wearing a mask would be effective. And so it's funny sometimes, like a couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of news reports because I think a grocery truck was unloading some supplies, and then they were held up because people wanted to steal toilet paper. And it's such a minor product, but when there's not enough of it, it can get really, intense. People really, really want toilet paper. There were lines for toilet paper. I think I was out of toilet paper for a week, and, of course it's annoying. But then I think during that time, it was like, when it's something as minor as toilet paper, what if it was food? Like, how would we react, in these sorts of situations, whatever the scarce good is? So I think the coronavirus, I don't really know. I don't think about it too often. I wear a mask all the time.
Okay.
Just socially. The other day, actually, a friend and I were on the tram, and we're both healthy, and we were just out. And I think most people do wear masks, but it's also not that easy to get masks. And so anyway, that day we weren't wearing it. And then we got yelled at, actually, for not wearing masks. So I guess kind of still a lot of fear in the city right now.
Okay. I've heard about a shortage of masks, but I didn't know about any other products. Why would toilet paper why would that be a good that was not coming into your country?
So I think it started with masks, but then soap, sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, all of that was sort of out for not that long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then toilet paper, I think, was a surprise to most people. It was just all of a sudden you couldn't get any, and then you realized that everybody wanted it. And there are some pictures of people buying, here we buy toilet paper sort of in like long packs of 10. And so people were like stacking them in their apartments. And then there was a limit. You can only buy 2 rolls.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's just something that you would never expect.
Right.
But now it's all back to normal. Now the shelves are stocked and get sanitizer
Okay.
everywhere.
Well, I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to share just about living in Hong Kong that people wouldn't generally know? I'm just very, very interested in the culture.
I think when I was growing up in suburban Canada, my family is from Taiwan. And so every summer I'd spend about a month or so visiting my grandparents and my aunts and uncles in Taiwan, in Taipei. And so it's their capital city. And it was, the biggest, most glamorous city I'd ever seen. And then after college, I moved to Singapore, which was even more developed. And then during one of my business trips, I came to Hong Kong, and I remember leaving a meeting and then going to this area called the TST Avenue of Stars and just sitting down and reflecting at all the skyscrapers. So I don't know if you've seen pictures of the Hong Kong skyline, but it's just like super, super dense.
I have, thanks to
You
you.
have, right? And it's just, it was just windows everywhere. And I think I've always been a big dreamer. So just sitting there and like marveling at like, God, like in every single little tiny square are people with dreams and ambitions and hopes, and like how amazing it would be to live in a place where there's just so much going on all the time. And so I think I was in Singapore, and it had been 4 years. And at that time I was 25, I think. And I was sort of thinking, okay, God, do I stay in Singapore? Do I go back to Canada to go to grad school? Do I leave somewhere else? And I felt him very clearly say, like, don't apply. You're where you're supposed to be. And then 2 weeks later, my boss asked me if I wanted to transfer to Hong Kong.
Wow.
And so for me, because I work in sort of like the arts in book publishing, getting a job in Hong Kong was quite difficult because I don't speak Cantonese. And so it wasn't an area like, I don't know, medicine or finance where it was a little easier to switch. I don't think if it weren't for God providing this opportunity, I ever would have had a chance to come here. But when I moved here, it actually took me maybe almost a year to feel fully settled, because even after living in a big city like Singapore, Hong Kong was just a next level of intense. There really is always something to do. In Canada, if a restaurant closes at 9, if the grocery store closes at 5 in the suburbs, here it's like everything is 24 hours, and there's new things opening all the time, new exhibits, new people to meet, a lot of expats in like a transient community.
Okay.
So I think Hong Kong's just very, very vibrant. I know now it's kind of in the news for not so great reasons, but I think as a city, there's a lot to love.
Hey, I'm going to jump in here for just a minute to let you know about Pure Haven. Pure Haven is the maker of fresh, safe, personal, and home care products. Their mission is to educate consumers about pure, safe, alternative personal care choices that empower people to live the healthiest lifestyle possible. Their products are 100% free of toxins, guaranteed. I've been using Pure Haven for years now, and I love that I can use their products on myself and my kids without worrying about the ingredients. One of my go-to products is their dry shampoo, which is getting even more useful during quarantine time. You part your hair, you shake the powder, you work it through, and you're good to go. The very first time I bought dry shampoo, I just picked some up from the drugstore to try. It was a spray version, and to my horror, I found out that one of the ingredients was butane, as in highly flammable, and the fuel used in cigarette lighters. So no thank you. I was super excited when I saw that Pure Haven was making it. You can find that and their whole line of products by going to purehaven.com/girlstalkinglife. Please use code 258708 to support the show during the month of March. Now back to my conversation with Jenni. I want to talk about the Yay Project. So in 2018, you were...
19. Oh, no, sorry, you're right.
2018? Yeah? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You were inspired to begin this project. Talk to me about how that all started.
I think the amazing thing about God looking back is that how he leads us to our purpose or to start a certain thing isn't always linear. So sorry, I interrupted you when you said 2018, because I actually started in 2019, but he did tell me in 2018 that one day I would write about faith. And I think at that point, I think it was in 2017, I gotten out of a relationship with someone that was an atheist, and we'd had lots of sort of intense debates. And it was the first time in my life that I'd really questioned whether God existed. But then after that, I'd sort of debated and wondered for a while, but then came to the conclusion that even if God didn't exist, I would want to live my life like how a Christian should, according to what the Bible says. And so I said, well, that plus I'm pretty sure I've had encounters with God. I'm just going to have faith. And then it sort of grew from there. So in 2018, I was at a state where I was definitely willing to one day write about faith, but I wasn't sure what I would say. I didn't have any sort of ideas or, passion. Like I was willing, but just no direction. And I was also in the middle of doing a master's program. So working full time, doing a master's part time, and then getting into another relationship. It was just very, very busy. So I said, okay, God, once grad school is over, then I'll start. But then God is funny. And then I think in May of 2019, I think I thought my life was like, I was exactly in God's plan, and I was going to be done my master's in 2 months, and I was about to get engaged, and my life was like very clearly laid out. And then all of a sudden, everything changed, and I was still like 2 months from finishing my master's program. And so being in this stage where I had to continue to live life, but I just wanted to stay in bed all day. And the only way that I knew to survive was to rely on God and just say, God, I don't understand, but I've been through enough. And you have, you've shown me so many times that you're real and you're so good that I'm just going to let go and trust you. And for the first time, like 100% surrender, and just heal me as fast as you possibly can, and I'll just be here for you to carry. And I think even after that, it was maybe 2 or 3 months, I think, of just running to God 24/7. Like I just really needed like a word from him, whether it was through the Bible or through feeling him speak to me or through a podcast or reading a book, whatever it was, just needed to know his character and his truth and his promises. And it's like I feel like the more we really like meditate on those things and experience them and then know them deep in our hearts, the more we change. Our problems don't seem so big because we're not handling them alone. And then I was so comforted by the fact that, if God is so good and God loves me so much, then he has a plan. This isn't, the end of my life and I'm ending it in this deep valley, that he's doing something. I don't know what it is. And he always fights for us. And he not only fights for us, but he fights for every person that we feel has wronged us. Like he loves us all equally, no matter what mistakes we've made. And I think through that whole experience, he brought me to a place where I was just so in love with him. And then he said, start the A project. And I said, but God, I'm still so upset. I don't really understand how. But it was just like August, you're going to start in August. And then I was joking with a friend yesterday about how it all got started, because I think I'd asked my sister to create my website because she's a UX designer. She's very good at that. But then she was in the middle of being her friend's maid of honor and she was too busy to do that. So she said, maybe in 3 weeks, I'll sit down and do it. And I said, okay, then I guess I'll start in September. And then all of a sudden she sends me a text message saying, oh, I got a flat tire. I'm home all day. So I'll do your website.
So no, it really will be August.
Yeah, I was like, God, you're so funny. So I think that's a bit of the background as to why it got started. And then when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a color palette. I didn't have an idea of content. It was really just day by day praying and then writing out of like what I felt God had shown me during quiet time. And then more and more now doing it for, I think almost 7 months. I feel like God has given me more and more vision of future and things that he wants me to learn or do, whether it's like develop in my own character. Like one thing was to pray more for other people. I think because it started and I was in a season of pain, I was praying for myself a lot, but now it's more than that, right? It's not just a project just for me, but hopefully a project where I can help other people fall in love with God and also appreciate their God-given design as well.
Well, I think one of the things that makes you and your site and your feed so it just draws you in is your vulnerability and your honesty. Just you saying, this is what I'm going through and God, this is how I need you today. It's just very, you just have a very beautiful way of expressing yourself.
Thank you. That's so kind. And so I was listening to one of your podcasts recently, the one on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
And so I read the description for type 4 and was like, yep, that's me. But I think growing up, and I think especially in Hong Kong, I don't know very many 4s. No one in my family is a 4 in terms of having lots and lots of emotions and wanting to share them. So I think God is just so funny that in a time where I just needed him so much and wanted to share about his love, it almost wasn't as easy to do it in real life. I mean, of course, I had small group and I had friends, but it wasn't, sort of every day that I could call up a girlfriend and sort of unload all of my joy and emotions. But then through Instagram, through writing, it was very natural. And at first, of course, I don't know if anyone's going to read it or they're going to think I'm overly emotional, but it's just been so cool to meet people from all over the world and just be able to connect on our love for Jesus in all levels. Like when we're feeling so happy, during a day, or whether we're really struggling with something, we can just come together and support one another because we all go through the ups and downs in life at different times. And I think having that awareness and care for one another is really nice. I mean, even with us, right? Total strangers now getting to talk about
this. I know. I love your artwork, and you do this all yourself, right? What is the inspiration behind that?
Oh, thanks for asking, because I think this is one of the things that makes me so happy, because before starting the Gay Project, I didn't draw at all. And I think growing up, we all want to be good at something, right? So I think I spent a lot of my life trying to figure out where I was skilled and what I could realistically do. And something like drawing and being an artist, even having people say that they like art, is just something that I would have always thought, would be really cool, but I just didn't have the skills or any sort of way to do it. And then just one day, I think for the first week or so of doing the Gay Project, I was just using stock photos. And then I thought, no, I mean, if I really want this to be all about celebrating our God-given design, I need to do something that I create, even if it's not so good at the beginning. Just with faith, I need to do something myself. And so I just went to the Apple store and bought an iPad and Apple Pencil, just with faith, like this has to work. It's not a cheap investment. I just need to, God help me make it work. And then because I didn't know what I was doing, I just prayed a lot, honestly, during those days. And even now, I just journaled so much and felt like God was telling me things. And so I kept it in a notebook. And then when it came time to draw, I would pick out phrases that stood out to me and then just pray, like, God, please give me an image, and then just try and draw it out. And then, it worked to my great. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, right? That God works in these crazy, amazing ways.
Right.
But I'm still like, oh my gosh, like, how did this happen, God? Thank you for blessing me in this way.
Well, it's so cute, and they're so inspiring and uplifting. They're happy images. So you do a great job.
Thank you so much.
You talk about celebrating our God-given design. What are some ways that you encourage women to do that?
So I think one reason that God gave me this vision, I think, is because I didn't realize it until I think the start of 2019, that I'd been carrying this fear of rejection for so long. I think when I was young, there was like an instance of like childhood bullying and just like these pain points that you don't necessarily realize you still have. You move on in life or whatever. But then one day during our church-wide fast, I was just listening to a worship song and felt God bring that memory to mind and also remind me of how like he was there when I was feeling that pain and wanted to like heal me from it. But I think it's not always easy to be still and be honest about what we're really feeling or really wanting. And so for me to get to that point of even accepting my God-given design, like it took a lot of time and willingness to confront the ugly, I think, as well. So in terms of encouraging others to celebrate their God-given design, I think that's part of it. Like accepting that our story is our God-given story, right? Like God has, he gave us specific parents. He knows exactly where we are right now. He literally designed us with specific gifts, and he has a plan and purpose. And to really press into that and sit with God and ask, like, God, like, these are some things I want, or this is how my life currently is, and just asking God and having that dialogue and that openness to, pivot if he says pivot, or stay if he says stay, or go if he says go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. You talk about boldly praising God, and based on what you've said, in our conversation, you definitely do that. What are some things that God has been doing for you through this?
Oh, that is a very good question. What are some things God has been doing? I think God has been giving me greater and greater boldness. So once I shook off that, well, I shouldn't say that. Once he healed me from that fear of rejection, I realized that I used to live life in a way that was very me focused. I wouldn't do certain things because I didn't want to get hurt, or I wanted to succeed in one area, and it wasn't really including God. And so through this, I think ultimately when we want that meaning and that fulfillment in life, when we look to our own methods, it never feels that fulfilling anyway, at least for me. And so when I actually finally surrendered and said, God, whatever you want to do, I'll do, I just feel this great joy that I'm exactly where God wants me to be in terms of like location, but also in terms of how I spend my time. And so I just think I'm so much happier and more confident and sure of how I am spending my days than I ever have before. And it might not be necessarily logical from like a worldly point of view, like maybe I should be chasing, more career driven things or whatever. But I feel like whatever God tells us to do, whatever it is, it's God's plan, and it's our joy to be able to do it.
I feel like when I started this, I was in, having some inner turmoil about it, and he was really faithful and guiding me in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so I was able to step out and do something that I wasn't comfortable doing. And
Yeah.
he's been teaching me so much through this process. So yeah,
that's awesome.
I get that.
I just listened to your 1 year anniversary podcast earlier today. I think it's really, really beautiful too to hear your story, and also how, like, even sometimes when we hear God give us an idea, it's not instant. Like the next day we've got a plan. Like sometimes it takes a while for us to, develop on the inside or whatever to get to that stage. But he knows us, right? And he loves us. And so there's no like condemnation if we, feel like we're going too fast or too slow or too focused on this and that. Like God loves us. He'll help us, every step of the way.
Right. Thank you. You talk a lot about prayer, and you even have a post on your blog about praying all day. Talk to me about what that looks like for you.
So I wrote that post last September during, I think, still in the thick of needing God so much. And I think what amazes me about that, I guess just to give a summary, that post was really me trying to invite God into every moment I could. So giving him the first moments of the day when I woke up. So we get up, make coffee, read the Bible, pray, journal, download, worship. And I even felt like 2 hours was not enough time. You make your coffee, half an hour, you're like more awake. And then by the time you're done praying, you're done, and then you haven't worshiped or listened. And then, going to work, and then taking, the bathroom break, just being like, oh, hey, God. So, just inviting him into I think at that point it was like, God, my heart hurts. Please help me. Bathroom break. But just, even if it was to do with like friendships, I don't know if it's like this where you are, but in Hong Kong, as soon as everyone's on the commute, it's like pull out the iPhone, and then people are either watching videos on social media or whatever it is. And I thought, okay, well, I could distract myself, or I could just pray and see what happens, and then pray before bed and give thanks and pray at the gym. It was just, if God is, not that we necessarily have to talk to God all day, but why not, like, if we want to. And so the season is a little bit different because I feel like God has been telling me that like I'm going to be busier and our relationship will change, and not to be fearful that I'm not spending as much time with him and therefore our relationship will weaken. Like I have a lot of friends here who have young kids, and for them even 10 minutes alone to pray is rare.
Yeah.
And so to have 2 hours is like near impossible.
I know, that's what I'm thinking when you were describing that. I'm like, 2 hours. It sounds amazing, but not realistic in my life currently.
Exactly. So I think sometimes when I honestly wonder, I'm like, God, I don't understand why my love life is a certain way or why things happened in a certain way. I do think that, he knows, right? And the fact that I can at this moment spend 2 hours in prayer and plan things for the Yay Project is part of his plan, and to enjoy that and then also enjoy the time when I have young kids and don't have as much time, because either way he knows us and he moves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jenni. I am going to switch gears just a little bit and ask you for your favorite 5. What are 5 things that you wear or eat or do that are your favorites right now?
Okay, I think this is so fun. I love talking about this. I'm going to start with a piece of clothing and a hair product. So my first thing is, have you heard of this British brand called Whistle?
No. Mm-mm.
Whistles is, they have a lot of dresses and jumpsuits and blouses, whatever, but they just have lots of different prints and lots of different cuts. And so right now I'm really into like mid-calf, flowy, sort of floral printed dresses. And I haven't gotten to wear too many because we're working from home a lot right now because of the coronavirus. I've been in leggings a lot, but I love those dresses from Whistles. And second, I love Olaplex. It's this hair treatment that's called a bond rebuilder.
Okay.
And so you put it on like a mask, but it does something to like the insides of your hair or something. It smooths it all out, but then you still have to use conditioner. But my natural hair texture is really like quite coarse and frizzy, and this really does a lot to smooth it out.
Okay. That sounds
interesting.
It
might sound crazy, but yes, I think Kim Kardashian or someone made it famous. And so now it's sold everywhere. And I tried it and I was like, oh, this is quite good.
My younger daughter has very curly hair and it's beautiful, but she always wants it straight, because that's not her natural look. So she might be very interested in that. Yes.
Give it a try, Olaplex. My third one is this book called I Give You Authority by Charles Kraft. So it was recommended by the lady who's in charge of our healing ministry at work. And I think growing up, I always went to very sort of charismatic churches. And then when I moved to Singapore after university, I went to a more conservative church that was part of Tim Keller's City to City network. And so I loved it because it was just sort of a different way of experiencing God than I ever had before. And then my current church is sort of in the middle. And so there's still a lot that I feel like I am learning about what it means to live in the fullness of what it means to be a Christian. So like Jesus died for us to have so many things, right? And we're given the Holy Spirit as a helper. So what does that really, really mean? And so this book has really helped me understand more about like the authority that we have through Jesus, and then what it means to like live in freedom and help others experience freedom too.
Sounds great.
Yeah. And then the fourth one, so I listen to music on repeat. Like if I have a favorite song, it just plays over and over. During last year, I listened to all of the Run Collective albums, like almost only Run Collective for 6 months. This year, I'm a little lighter. And so I've discovered the top Christian playlist on Spotify. Uh-huh. I don't even know what's playing. I just hit play and I just really like a lot of it. It's like quite folky and quite upbeat and quite good. And then my last item was the iPad and Apple Pencil, just because it just brings me so much joy to, I think, not only create, but there's just so much prayer involved, because me drawing on my own really is not very good. But then going through that whole process, I think with God is really, really fun.
Okay. And you bought that totally on faith, not even knowing what was going to happen with it. That's so cool.
Exactly. I know. It's just, I'm still amazed sometimes I mean, I don't know why I'm so amazed. You know, God obviously is amazing and is so good to us. But then when we realize, like, God, you did this, it's
Yeah.
just like so full of thanks.
Right. People will tell me, oh, you have such a great voice for podcasting. And when I first even had this idea, I had no clue. No one has ever told me prior to that I did. And listening even in the very beginning to, things I had recorded, it sounds like nails on a chalkboard, to me.
No.
So I've gotten over that since then, but just, I had no idea. There was no way I would have ever known such a thing, but God had it all planned out.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear. And you really do.
Well, thank you. And who knew, but God, right?
Yeah, God knew.
Well, tell people where they can find you and then just a little bit about what to expect when they get there.
So right now I am mostly on Instagram at the.yay.project, and then on Pinterest at the Yay Project, and then at theyayproject.com. And I also recently joined Facebook as well. But I think right now it's a lot of my personal daily reflections out of my quiet time. But more and more this week, I feel like God has been giving me more of a vision on how I can serve more women and the women that I've met, because I think part of going back to the beginning where I grew up in such diverse environments, whether it was my school or my church, and just seeing the beauty of how God has created so many different people and so many different skills, and how our pain points make us who we are. They don't detract from our beauty. They're just part of our story. And then starting the Yay Project. And I feel like I, daily have conversations with women all around the world, India, South Africa, Australia, the US. And just, it's not always so easy, I guess, to understand what it's like serving God all around the world and how people even came to faith. And I'd love to be able to share those stories and also, help people also share in these friendships that I've built. So I think soon I would love to start this Yay Sisters series as well. I think God is so cool with the name, right? Yay goes with everything. Yay marriage, yay single, yay kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And starting with Yay Sisters.
Okay, wonderful. Jenni, thank you so much for coming on and just explaining a little bit about Hong Kong for us and telling us your story. And I thank you for boldly doing what God called you to do.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think it's just like the coolest experience to be able to meet you, a sister from literally halfway around the world, and get to talk about God and how He's moved in our lives.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jenni. I just love her heart for God and for people. And when she talked about buying the iPad and Apple Pen and just praying that God would give her the ability to create something that honored Him. If you haven't seen Jenni's Instagram feed, I encourage you to go take a look and see how God has gifted her. Find her at the.yay.project. Since Hong Kong is further along in this health crisis than we are in the US, I asked Jenni last week for her advice for those of us who are now closer to the epicenter. This was her response to me. She said, with the situation changing almost daily, it so helps to be able to pray in community and be led by God-seeking leaders. She said to focus on seeking and hearing from God personally first and foremost, and also be strengthened in community. We are not alone in this. God is with us and in control, and has given us a family in Christ to help strengthen us too. She said it's time to stop, pause, listen, pray, and ask God to move on our behalf. Thank you for those words, Jenni. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, please share it with them this week. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.